Hello, and welcome to GrantTree Fundamentals. Today I want to talk about check-ins. The reason I want to talk about check-ins is because check-in protocol is a simple and powerful technique for improving communication. So this is an easy way for us to, as I said at the bottom, we're already, by the standards of most people in the world and by most businesses, pretty good at open, honest, assertive communication. But there are still things that we can do that help us be more of ourselves at our best, right, and help us get better. And check-ins is a really easy way to do that. The basic format of a check-in is somebody says, can we check in? Or I'd like to check in, or something like that, right? Kicks off the check-in round. And then each person says, I'd like to check in, and then is invited to name some feelings that they have, right? And it's generally simpler if you keep to the four core feelings, the straight four on the floor, to borrow a phrase from Northern Soul. Angry, sad, happy, and then this one, afraid, or worried, or scared, whatever word you want to use. Or anxious, yeah. These are all kind of flavors of the same feeling. Similarly, like for angry, some people are more comfortable using the word frustrated, or other similar things that are kind of related to angry. Whatever words you want to use, I think is fine. You know, there are very strict versions of this that say you have to just use these four, and you can't qualify them by saying a little or a lot. But I think just use it, you know. And then you can offer some explanation of those feelings if you want to. There's a principle in cognitive psychology about this trio of thoughts, feelings, and actions, and how they're all interlinked. So, you know, we have feelings because of thoughts that we have. So, you know, today I might be happy, and I'm happy because I'm doing GrantTree Fundamentals and I like it, you know. But you don't have to offer that explanation. You could just say, I'm angry, and then you end up by saying, I'm in. And then everybody else in the room, maybe one person, maybe a whole group of people, says, welcome. And then you go around the room. So some things to note. If you don't want to go into how you're feeling, you don't have to. You know, you could just say, as long as it's true, you could just say, I'm happy to be in this meeting, or I'm feeling hopeful that this is going to be a productive session. Or you can even just say pass. Right? But whatever you say, everybody still says welcome. And there's some general ground rules. If somebody asks to check in, please let them check in. You know, even if you don't want to, even if you just want to say pass, then please let them check in. The guy who created this protocol has this rule and describes this as be silent. But I think it's nicer to say please listen during other check-ins. Don't interrupt, don't ask for qualification, let them get to the point at which they say I'm in. Ideally, let the round of check-ins continue before you want to ask any follow-up questions. Check-ins are confidential, right? If people want to come into a meeting and say, you know, my context of this meeting is I'm angry because my relationship with my boyfriend or girlfriend is falling apart. You know, if they want to disclose that to you because that's going to help them, then, you know, don't go sharing that around, unless they say that it's okay, right? And only talk about your own feelings. So this is the tricky one, the bit where we're going to say, you know, I want to check in, I'm feeling. Now, if it's any sentence that begins, I'm feeling that, you know, I'm feeling that you're being really aggressive, that's not really a feeling, that's a thought, you know? So you stick to your own perspective and your own feelings, and you disclose things that are genuine feelings rather than thoughts, and just sticking to that core four of the happy, the sad, the angry, the afraid, is the simplest way to make sure that you stick to that. I think there are some reasons why check-ins are a really good thing to have. I think they're useful in the short term because there are always emotions in the room, right? We're human beings, we are emotional beings if we're not psychopaths, right? So we're always coming with some emotions. And we see the world through the lens of ourselves. So it's kind of helpful if we come into a meeting and we say, oh, this is my context, you know? This is what I'm bringing into this meeting. Because this is the stuff that I'm going to see all the discussions that we're going to be having through. Now, it may be that by naming some feelings, that's it, that they're done. You know, you came to the meeting and you're really angry because you were cycling in, and on the way somebody cut you up in a taxi, and so you start the meeting like, I'm angry because somebody cut me up in a taxi, and you've named that anger is acknowledged, it can move on and you can concentrate. Or maybe it's something bigger that's going to be with you throughout the meeting, but it's still good for yourself and for other people to understand your context, you know, how you're seeing the world here and now. They're also useful in the long term because they're a practice of kind of, you know, honesty. right? It's a simple exercise where we're just saying, this is what's going on for me, let me speak to you honestly. And it builds that kind of honesty, safety, bandwidth in our relationship. It builds that ability for us to be vulnerable with each other, to trust each other. And that's the stuff that really enables creativity, innovation, and change. I know last week I said go away and please recommend the Brené Brown talk on vulnerability. I also recommend the follow-up talk, which I watched this weekend, on the power of shame. And she said when I did that vulnerability talk, you know, I got lots of calls from people saying, oh, you know, Dr. Brown, please come in and talk in our business, but we don't want you to talk about vulnerability. We just want you to talk about innovation, creativity, and change. And she was like, do you know what, having studied this, and she's a really kind of like qualitative, data-driven psychologist. She was like, having studied this, I will tell you that vulnerability is the wellspring of creativity, innovation, and change. And there's that quote which I sort of had to mess it around with it to fit on the slide, but there's a little passage that Dan put on People in Culture channel earlier this week about how vulnerability-based trust, i.e. the ability to be transparent and honest with each other, you know, not to have to hide weaknesses or mistakes, to speak freely and fearlessly, to be able to say and mean I screwed up, I need your help. This is the kind of stuff that allows us to work in a way that's more effective than the way that other organisations work, because we're not wasting, it's not just that we're not wasting time on pretending to be something that we're not. It means that we can build up a body of common knowledge with each other. You know, we can collaborate more effectively because we're able to be open and honest. So I think that, you know, like building this honesty is good for everything about how we work. But it also helps us with wholeness, right? It helps us have a more fulfilling experience of being alive as human beings. So I think it's worthwhile on its own. When might you want to check in? The start of a meeting can be useful because it just kind of says, okay, you know, let's clear the decks and now we can then focus on the agenda. But it can also be useful like in the middle of a discussion as a recovery mechanism or as something to diffuse, you know, when you need it or if you detect that someone else needs it. So the difference for me between those two is as a recovery mechanism is, you know, I say something and I think, oh, I just think I've just been like a dick, you know. So I can say to someone, oh, could we check in? And I might say, I am worried that I have just been a dick, right? You know, and you might say, I'm angry because you have just been a dick. And that's great. But I've given you that opportunity to, you know, for us to diffuse that little tension that we built up by the fact that our interaction went a bit wrong. But, you know, equally, I might find that this conversation that we're having is becoming quite emotionally charged. Like you know, and actually the emotional charge is starting to build up so much that I'm starting to think, oh, you know, I'm becoming a bit de-skilled here. I'm starting to worry that, you know, that I'm going to explode with this feeling rather than stick to this conversation. So you might say, oh, can we just check in? I'm really worried because this is a really important conversation and I'm not sure if it's going well. You know? And that then just helps us get back into the, you know, back into the meat of stuff. Oh yeah, it's worth bearing in mind that when we were talking about non-violent communication last week, that, you know, the more you suppress feelings, the more likely they are to kind of slip and slide around, right? So you can be in a situation where what you're actually feeling is you're actually afraid, right? Because this is an issue that's really important to you and it really matters that the situation is resolved. But the more you push that fear down, the more likely it is it's going to come out in an aggressive, angry way. So actually not letting that happen and being more skilled and actually saying, oh, what's going on for me? Can we vocalize it? Can we check in? Can we be useful? There was another thing which I forgot to pick up earlier, so I'm going to go back to it. The 4 core feelings. I first encountered these 4 core feelings when I was in group therapy and was doing a group called Self-Esteem Through Emotion. So they're like, oh, there are 4 feelings.
Justin said that the video's dropped out.
Oh no. The call ended. Oh, yeah, okay. I'll try and restart. Yeah, and I remember having a discussion with the therapist, was in the group, and I was like, surely there are more than 4 feelings, you know? And she was like, well, let's put it this way, there are more than 4 feelings, but, you know, if you were learning to taste wine, to blind taste wine, you know, you might eventually get to a point at which you could say, oh yeah, you know, this is a Shiraz grown on a south-facing slope in, you know, the Dordogne. But initially, You know, if you're just starting out, you might just want to say, oh, this is a red wine or a white wine, like, right? Or, oh yeah, this is a, you know, it's kind of a fruity wine, or like, so yes, there are more emotions. You know, there are more emotions than these, but these are four fairly useful big categories, and they're a great place to start. So that is the check-in protocol. Questions, comments, thoughts, observations?
Can I make a comment? I just wanted to comment on the sort of refused check-in dynamic and why it's important to accept the check-in from other people. I've experienced myself, I consider myself reasonably aware of my feelings, but I experienced, for example, back when we did the interview training with Stephen Kewen, I remember that we were focusing on the CV stuff, and I had some strong feelings about the CV. I didn't want us to focus on the CV, and I realized those feelings there were in the way. And I kind of tried to check in, but I didn't feel like my check-in was received in any way. And then I spent the next 15 minutes dealing with the kind of seething anger at not having my check-in received. So if you want to piss off somebody, basically, if they try to check in, you say, no, let's just move on. That's really effective way, so try not to do that, basically.
Yeah, I mean, even if you just want to pass, if somebody else says, can we check in, you know, they've probably got something that they want to say.
I'm just wondering what might be the steps to implement this, because it's a bit of a big step, a change for us to start meeting with this. How do we make it a reality of a company where it's not a must, but it does work when it's required?
I think I mean, I'd welcome other people's thoughts on that, but my initial response would just be to say, you know, this is something that I've been aware of for a while. I know Dan has, maybe other people have experienced bits of this, but it's just explaining to everybody what this is, making it a tool available to everybody, not saying every meeting has to start in this way, but saying to everybody, this tool, you know, this is why we think it's a good idea to use it. Now you're all adults, if you want to use it, it's there for you. That will be something. Yeah, that's kind of my answer, but I mean, I'd welcome other people's thoughts about whether this is something that we should make a conscious effort to start doing more, or I don't know.
I would vote for us encouraging that. I've been in a few meetings where people have checked in, and it's really nice to have the context of why someone may be seeming a little bit distracted, or sometimes it's even just pushed me to actually say, yeah, you know what, I'll check in and acknowledge feelings that I maybe hadn't even really recognized or given a name, if you know what I mean.
I have never had a check-in on that, so yeah, it's always the outcome has always been very positive. It builds so much trust with the people that you checked in with.
If anything, it feels like a nice exercise in the vulnerability.
Yeah,
it's truly putting what you're doing out there and saying, you know, take it, don't take it, whatever.
Yeah, and so often we don't think about our own feelings enough, especially at the workplace. Most companies would kind of like the professional attitude is for you to leave your feelings behind. That's not bringing your whole self to work if you can't even acknowledge your own feelings.
But also, the more you try to leave them behind, the more they creep back in. So, for example, you might lash out at some. I've been guilty of that, just being a bitch to people at work, and it's like, actually I'm really anxious, like this is why this is happening, and feeling really crappy and apologizing to people earlier. And it's like, the more you have a kind of soft way of, as and when it feels okay to make people aware of what's going on for you, the lesser the chance that you'll do something stupid because those feelings didn't have any space to come out. That's where I'm from.
Can I also just one way to introduce things is, I mean, I'm very big on the idea of personal responsibility and so building your own environment. And a simple way to introduce this is that whenever you go into a meeting, all the people in this room or the people who watch this video, hello, you think, you know, do I feel like I have some feelings that I would like to share? Is there anything I'd like to say that would that I'd like to either get off my chest or that would give some context? Am I feeling angry, happy, sad, or scared? And if you do, say I'd like to check in. And hopefully everybody's seen this video and become aware of the fact that when you say I'd like to check in, it will allow you to check in, and you might encourage other people to check in as well who haven't thought of that. And all you can do is, you know, you can't change everybody else around, but you can act on yourself and just take that step whenever you lose a meeting.
I think to pick up on Pal's point, that's very much what, when I say like there are emotions in the room, there are kind of two ways that we can be with emotions. We can say, you know, they're not here, they don't have a part in business, you know, like we're going to deny them. And in some ways that makes us more subject to them. We can't speak about them, and so they have more of an opportunity to push us around. Alternatively, we can kind of get them out and be like, oh, there they are, and then actually exercise some choice over how we respond to them. You know, I could show you that I'm angry by shouting at you, or I could tell you that I'm angry by saying I'm angry. Which of these is a way that's going to, you know, like, get the anger what it wants? For me, the way that's going to get the anger what it wants is when I say, I'm angry at you because of this, and then I'm explaining to you, this is the boundary of mine that you have crossed. You know, so now you understand more what I want from our relationship, and you're able to respond to it. As opposed to, I shout at you, and then we're into a kind of aggressive, violent, toxic communication in which I'm not really going to be hurt.
There's another thought which is about difficult conversations. So when you're entering a meeting, and we all get these meetings from time to time with kind of dread, particularly resolution meetings. Nobody really wants to have a resolution meeting, but they're necessary to try and resolve these tensions. Usually, if you come into a resolution meeting or a difficult meeting, it is because there are emotions at play that are kind of obstructing the communication. In fact, usually when there's a resolution meeting needed, it's because there is that disconnect between yourself and the other person, and the communication is not flowing. And opening up with a check-in and saying, look, I feel scared about how this meeting is going to go. I feel hopeful that we're going to resolve our differences. I feel happy that we are having this meeting. You know, like, opening with this kind of vulnerability can help rebuild that communication with the other person, which is precisely what you're trying to do with a difficult conversation or a resolution.
Anyone else have anything they would like to do? Anyone on the line?
I haven't checked in personally, but I've been in a meeting where someone checked in with me. I found it really helpful because you actually see, like I said, the lens, you see things through their eyes rather than yours more than anything really in the meeting. I think you understand the person a lot better afterwards.
Okay.
Just wondering, it's maybe a bit controversial, I'm wondering if it may be a good idea if, for example, you're feeling so anxious or so unproductive or so consumed in thoughts of other things that it may actually be a good idea for you to say, actually I don't think I can contribute to this meeting at the moment because of the stuff that's happening for me. That's, if we can get to a place where that's acceptable and that's okay.
I think absolutely. Objectively, you've got, like, let's say for example, somebody comes into a meeting to discuss how to structure an aspect of Guardian V2, for example, how to make the user interface better. And they come in and they check in, well, you know, my grandparents just died and my family is in turmoil and I don't think I can concentrate on anything. The sensible thing to do is to say, like, would you like to leave this meeting? I mean, you don't have to be here, like, you clearly have more important things to attend. And I think that's one of the positive outcomes of a check-in, that allows the person to get that out and for other people to react and say, you know, maybe you shouldn't be here, rather than the person just having this kind of lack of concentration throughout the meeting, and then people feel like, well, you're not really in the meeting, they get angry at them, like, and all this broken communication happens because you just don't have that information.
I think the most amazing thing about being able to say that, just being able to say that, like, I can't do this because of all the other things, like,
I'm still struggling with that. I'm still struggling with that. Because part of me is like, I'm going to push through it.
Yeah, because you're strong and we're just make it through. But when I see strong people saying that, it makes me feel like, oh yeah, of course, I gotta take care of myself too. Like this, I can't work as well until I have taken care of myself. And seeing people that doesn't, it's like, oh, this is acceptable. Like, this is okay. And I always, afterwards, I always come back just feeling so much better and so much more ready to work. Yeah, fuck, I think we should be encouraging that. Like, if you have having a breakdown, tell us all. You know?
And the check-in protocol is from this thing called the McCarthy Show, which is this whole load of kind of like processes from this guy who used to work at Microsoft, so like Agile and all these things, you know, these kind of very process-driven ways of breaking down like the source code of successful relationships. Like, it comes from a software development environment. But one of the other things, one of the other kind of core protocols that sits on side is the checkout protocol, which is that in any interaction that you're in, you're entitled to say, I'm going to check out, and that's it. You don't have to do anything else. That's it. You can then step away. So you're in a meeting, and you can, you know, you might want to say, I'd like to check in. I'm really anxious about blah, 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 blah. I'm in. Welcome. I'd like to check out. And then you can go. Because it's just a, because, if you think about it, like, these, as I say, these things are written like, like an operating system for a business. And it's like saying, okay, if you send the command, I'd like to check out, that formally ends your interaction there in a way that says, this is a non-violent, and it means a lot of stuff. It means, this is my non-violent way of saying, I'm going to leave this conversation, and that's the end of it. And we don't have to go through an awkward, well, I think I'm going to go. And are you sure? Yeah, I'm just going to, all right, we'll just say, I'm going to check out. And then you can go.
Yeah.
Well, maybe sometimes it's, if a meeting, because all of us have been in meetings where they arrive at a place where they're no longer very productive. Maybe they've gone off course, or the discussion has just gone completely lopsided. I don't know. But maybe sometimes it's a good idea to say why you're checking out. For example, I feel that I've got stuff to do at the moment that will be a better use of my time. It's difficult, but sometimes meetings get to a place where it's like, some meetings are excellent, some meetings are rubbish.
So I think that's a really good point, Pat, right? But how many times have we seen people basically say exactly what you've just said, but it's a really barbed comment, just to leave and like, yeah, actually I've got important stuff to do and leave.
Yeah.
We've seen that. So I think
how do you say that? How do you discuss that?
Exactly, but I think that's the thing, is I think you need to, there's maybe something else that needs to go in with that, because I've definitely seen that chucked in as this is bullshit, let's not do this, and it becomes like a kind of passive aggressive thing. So I wonder what can we put in front of that to make it useful and not that kind of slightly violent.
Because the truth is, none of us want unproductive meetings, and we all get frustrated when the feeling is that the meeting's gone off course. So what can we do to kind of fix it?
But at the same time, as we discussed last week in the non-violence thing, refusing to, so ending the conversation, like this conversation is over, is a form of violence. So actually, if somebody's talking to you and you say, I'd like to check out, and you leave, that's really quite a violent thing to do in a meeting.
My family got checked out.
I think we should maybe that's a thing to raise with Stephen Quayle, but some kind of way to interact, a tool that would help us together when we feel that a meeting has gone off course, to bring it back on.
But you can check in at that point.
Is it like a diffusing check-in? Just say, I want to check in right now, I feel like we're off course, I feel like not everyone is part of it.
That's not appealing.
You might be, I feel angry because this meeting has deviated from the purpose that I thought it had, and I no longer feel that it's serving me in any way, I no longer feel I'm serving the meeting to be here. But I think there's another one,
maybe some additional tools as well, because I think that's useful, but how do we then, because when several people are having that feeling, that's cool, but what do we then do to either say, okay, this is it, or how do we bring it back on topic, or
I think there is another tool in another one of these kind of core protocol things where you can say, oh, can I just double check what the purpose of this meeting is? Because the point is that the purpose of the meeting might have shifted from when it started. And you might say, oh, okay, if that's now the purpose of this meeting, then actually I don't think it's sensible for me to be here now.
Maybe we need a shut up and listen dishes protocol.
But yeah, I'll go away and disagree and I'll send some stuff. If there's nothing else to add, does anyone else have anything they'd like to add on this topic? Okay, then I would like to trail next week's.